Part 2. Reasons we struggle to say no. It's one of the smallest words in the English language. Yet, many of us believe it carries such awesome power that we're afraid to say it. In those instances when we do manage to say no, we instinctively downplay our intentions, offering excuses and apologies to the requester. Why does this tiny word carry such gravity? Why are we so hesitant to utter it? This section will highlight and explain the most common reasons we have difficulty telling others no. You'll no doubt recognize a few of them in your own life. As you'll see in the following pages, I have personal experience with nearly all of them. Most of us were raised to believe that saying no is rude and egocentric. This belief becomes a significant part of our value system. So we spend our childhoods and much of our adult lives trying to live in a way that reflects an image we consider more honorable and respectable. The result? We end up saying yes to everyone around us, even as we become increasingly frustrated, embittered, and resentful. You're about to learn the unhealthy reasons you dread saying no. Recognizing them, some are less obvious than others, is the first step toward freeing yourself from the fallacious belief that saying no is mean, cold-hearted, or selfish. Let's get started. We want to avoid offending people. People often take offense at things that aren't intended to give offense. An example is hearing the word no after they ask for someone's help. You can probably recall instances when this has happened to you. Someone asks you for your time, attention, or money, and you respectfully decline the request. The individual's reaction is immediate and openly displayed on his or her face. A furrowed brow, a deep frown, and tight lips betray hurt feelings and indignation. The individual takes offense. He or she may even utter "that's rude." Understandably, this causes you to feel pangs of guilt. As you watch the requester walk away, the displeasure evident in his or her body language, you can't help but feel as if you've done something wrong. But let's logically unpack this scenario. First, it's important to understand how this type of offense surfaces. It has nothing to do with moral outrage, the acrimony we tend to associate with taking offense. Nor is it a reaction to a perceived wrongdoing or act of villainy. Rather, when offense is taken in these circumstances, it usually stems from the requester's insecurities. He or she internalizes the word no as a personal rejection. It stings, which prompts the reaction. It took me years to come to this realization. When it finally dawned on me, everything changed. I realized that as long as I was respectful to the individual asking for my help, I wasn't responsible for any offense taken when I said no. This was a liberating feeling. It freed me from my fears of turning down requests. Think about someone in your life who takes offense upon hearing the word no. The next time this person asks you for help, and you're unable to offer it, pay attention to how you feel when you decline his or her request. Do you feel guilty? Do you feel as if you've done something wrong? Realize there's no reason to feel that way. As long as you're being courteous and candid, you're not responsible for any offense taken by the requester. We want to avoid disappointing people. If you're like me, you hate disappointing people. You cringe when you see a look of sadness following your words or actions. You shudder at the possibility that you may have been the cause. Seeing that look can make you feel as if you've let others down. It's more than just an intellectual realization. You can feel it in your gut. This guilt is unwarranted. You're not responsible for causing others disappointment when you say no to them. To fully appreciate this fact, it's important to understand how disappointment occurs. Disappointment springs from unmet expectations. Recall times in your life when you've experienced this emotion. The trigger was undoubtedly something that failed to meet your presumed outcome. For example, you might have visited a restaurant after reading rave reviews only to find that you disliked the food and ambience. Neither met your expectations, and you were thus disappointed. Another example, perhaps you expected your child to receive straight A's on his or her report card, and were surprised to find B's and C's. You were likely disappointed. Or let's say you're expecting a promotion at work. When you're passed over for the promotion, you feel let down. Why? Because your expectations were unrealized. Now, consider how this plays out when you say no to someone. Suppose a coworker asks for your help, but you're already overwhelmed by your own responsibilities. So you rebuff the request. Your coworker becomes visibly disappointed by your refusal to help. But is his or her disappointment truly your fault? Or did your coworker approach you with unrealistic and perhaps even unfair expectations regarding your ability and willingness to offer help? The latter scenario is almost certainly the case unless you had previously promised to help your coworker. That being true, you cannot be held responsible for his or her disappointment. When you acknowledge this fact, you'll find it easier to let go of your fear of disappointing people when you say no to them. You'll come to appreciate that their disappointment is neither your fault nor responsibility. This perspective will give you the courage to stop accommodating every request and invitation that comes your way. We want to avoid seeming selfish. Most of us care how others perceive us. We want to be thought of as good, caring, helpful individuals. To that end, we go out of our way to appear so through our actions. For example, we hold the door open for people. We smile at, greet, and listen to talkative strangers when waiting in line at the grocery store. And when we're asked to help out with something, we instinctively say yes. To do anything else would be selfish, right? And we certainly don't want folks to think we're selfish. This thought process is understandable. But it's also wrong-headed. Worse, it can spur us to make poor decisions regarding how we allocate our time and attention among competing demands. We have a limited number of hours to play with each day. That means every time we say yes to someone, we're saying no to someone or something else. And every time we say no, we free ourselves to spend that time and attention on another person or interest. In this light, is it truly selfish to say no? I believe it's not. Let me demonstrate with an example from my own life. I mentioned earlier that I used to be the go-to person when it came time to help friends move. My pickup truck and inclination to say yes made me the first person folks approached when they needed help. Unfortunately, the time I spent accommodating their needs was time I couldn't spend with my family, on my studies, and on the activities I enjoyed. In other words, by taking care of others, I was consciously neglecting to take care of myself. I was ignoring my family. I was putting my studies on the back burner. And I was growing increasingly stressed and unhappy because I wasn't able to do the things I relished. It was a terrible way to live. Self-care isn't selfish. It's necessary. The problem is, if you're constantly saying yes to other people, putting their priorities ahead of your own, you won't have the time or energy to care for yourself. And you'll slowly become irritated, cynical, and miserable. Again, it's a terrible way to live. Will some people consider you selfish when you say no to them? Of course. You can't control that. And it's worth noting, you're not responsible for them feeling that way. The most responsible thing you can do is care for yourself before you cater to others. Doing so often means saying no to their requests and invitations. After all, if you use up your time, energy, and attention on others, you won't have any left over for yourself. And that's no way to live a rewarding life. We desire to help others. Think back to the last time you helped someone. I'll bet it felt good. Your actions or advice improved that person's day, which was probably a fantastic feeling. That's why many of us love to help people. Knowing that we've contributed to someone else's happiness is its own heady reward. In fact, it can be addictive. Some of us look for ways to help others, even if doing so means ignoring our own needs and responsibilities. We become caregivers in search of people to care for. When we're asked for help, we jump at the opportunity. For many of us, the desire to help stems from an inclination to show others we love them. For example, we help family members or close friends because doing so is the simplest way to show them they matter to us. For others, the desire to help springs from an impulse to play the role of a white knight, swooping in to save the day. For example, we stop to help a stranded motorist change his or her flat tire. For still others, helping someone is a way to compensate for a perceived deficit. The gratitude we receive allows us to forget about traits we dislike about ourselves. These motivations are understandable. But left unchecked, they can cause us to repeatedly ignore our own needs and priorities. To be sure, helping others is honorable. But your resources are limited. You only have so much time, money, and attention at your disposal. It's important to be prudent in how you use these resources. There will always be someone who could benefit from your attention. There will always be people who will gladly accept your help if you offer it. But keep in mind, you're not responsible for solving other people's problems. You're responsible for yourself and those who depend on you, e.g. your immediate family. That doesn't mean you shouldn't help people. Rather, the best way to help people over the long run is to ensure your needs are met first. In other words, make sure that self-care has a higher priority than giving care. We struggle with low self-esteem. Self-esteem is a tricky, slippery thing. Sometimes, we're confident to the point that we feel we can conquer the world. Other times, we feel utterly insecure. We second-guess ourselves to the point that we're unable to take any action at all. These feelings affect how we perceive ourselves. They influence our self-image and shape our sense of self-worth. Insecurity can make us feel inadequate and even provoke twinges of shame. It's important to recognize this effect because it discourages us from saying no to people. Here's how it works. Burdened with a low self-image, we mistakenly believe our time is worth less than others' time. We wrongly assume our goals and interests are inferior to other people's goals and interests. We perceive our value to the world as somehow less than the value offered by those around us. Given this reasoning, it's no wonder we're inclined to put others ahead of ourselves. It's understandable that, when we're asked to help, we instinctively say yes when we should really say no given our other responsibilities. This isn't an easy problem to solve. Many of those who struggle with self-esteem issues have done so for years. Some have done so throughout their lives. Improving their self-image is likely to involve a long process with plenty of bumps along the way. The good news is that saying no can actually improve your sense of self-worth. The more you do it, the more you'll come to realize that your time, commitments, and aspirations are just as important as those of the requester. And that's a meaningful step toward improving your self-esteem. The art of saying no isn't intended to address or resolve emotional issues. It's intended to help you become more assertive and overcome the impulse to please people by saying yes to their requests and invitations. Along the way, you'll find that saying no with purpose and grace will give you the confidence to move forward in a way that's consistent with your convictions. We want others to like us. The desire to be liked is universal. We want others to be drawn to us, to trust us, and to feel better for having spent time with us. This desire is hardwired into our psyches. It's how we build connections with other people. We try to relate to them and empathize with them in the hope of being accepted by them. It's unsurprising that we often say yes when we know we should say no. It's an instinctive response born of our longing for other people's approval. Here again, I speak from experience. When I was in high school, I wanted desperately to be liked by my peers. And so, whenever someone asked me for a favor, whether that entailed my time, effort, or money, I jumped at the chance. I was the ultimate people pleaser. I was incapable of saying no since doing so meant abandoning an opportunity to receive someone's approval. This is a common weakness. Many people struggle with it even if they refuse to admit as much. But it's important to recognize this yearning for validation as a trigger for our tendency to say yes. When we're aware of our motivations, we can review them and take steps to realign our decisions with our values. If you routinely say yes to people so they'll like you, keep reading. I'll show you how to short-circuit this impulse and reclaim your time, energy, and dignity in the process. And here's something that should excite you. Learning to say no with purpose and poise will actually improve your status in the eyes of your friends, family members, and co-workers. You'll no longer be seen as a doormat. Instead, you'll gain their respect and inspire their trust. I'm happy to share my own embarrassing stories because they provide examples of personal growth. To that end, if I can overcome the people-pleasing habit, you can, too. We want to appear valuable. Think back to the last time you served as a resource for someone. Maybe this person sought your advice about something. Perhaps he or she asked your opinion. Or maybe this individual approached you for information that would benefit him or her in some way. It felt good, didn't it? It was nice to be appreciated. All of us like being perceived as valuable by others. We enjoy feeling relevant and important. It gives us higher status in others' eyes, if only for a short time. Here's the problem. This feeling can be intoxicating, prompting us to constantly seek opportunities to prove our worth and reinforce the idea that we're valuable. This inclination can spur us to say yes to requests when we should say no. For example, suppose a coworker asks you to help her with a report, and points out that you're an expert on the material. If appearing valuable is important to you, being identified as an expert will feel momentarily exhilarating. You'll be inclined to reinforce that notion by agreeing to her request, even if doing so means putting your own responsibilities on the back burner. Or suppose a friend asks you to help him move, pointing out that your aid would be invaluable to him. It feels good to be considered important, and you want your friend to continue thinking you're valuable. So you agree to help him. Unfortunately, doing so means committing several hours. That's time that might otherwise be spent doing things that are more consequential to you, for example, spending the day with your spouse and kids. I don't mean to suggest you should always turn down requests for help. That's neither the purpose nor intent of the art of saying no. Rather, I hope to encourage you to recognize your motivations for putting other people's priorities ahead of your own. Case in point, Do you regularly say yes to people just to appear valuable in their eyes? As I mentioned earlier, helping people is a respectable thing to do. But helping people for the wrong reasons will only reinforce a bad habit that'll eventually cause you to feel bitter and resentful. I'll show you a better way. We fear missing out on opportunities. Have you ever said yes to your boss because you were afraid that saying no would disqualify you for a raise, promotion, or new responsibilities? Have you ever said yes to a friend because you feared saying no would cost you a rewarding life experience? That's the fear of missing out, FOMO for short. It's the anxiety we feel at the prospect of being unable to take advantage of opportunities. And it's a common reason many of us say yes even when we realize saying no would be a better decision. For example, at the workplace, we take on new projects because we fear that declining them will impede the advancement of our careers. With our friends, we commit ourselves to activities because we're afraid to miss out on rewarding experiences. Social media only reinforces this tendency. We're constantly reading Facebook on our phones and tablets, watching others post about their experiences, and chiding ourselves for not having our own to post. We end up saying yes to things just so we don't feel left out. The curious result is that we start to feel unfocused, frustrated, and unhappy, even as we strive to take advantage of every opportunity. Why? Because we inevitably stretch ourselves too thin pursuing things that are inconsequential to us. So the problem isn't that we say yes to opportunities. The problem is that we fail to discriminate between the wrong opportunities and the right ones. Remember, there's only so much time in the day. You can't do everything. That means each time you say yes to something, you tacitly say no to something else. In pursuing some opportunities, you miss out on others. This is one of the reasons it's important to learn to say no. By declining some offers, you allow yourself the freedom to say yes to those that'll prove truly rewarding to you. This change in habit requires a change in mindset. It entails abandoning your fear of missing out while remaining aware of opportunities that are consistent with your goals and interests. We succumb to emotional bullying. You'll occasionally run into people who refuse to take no for an answer. They'll go to great lengths to compel you to say yes, including using emotional bullying. Emotional bullying occurs when one person makes another feel afraid, angry, or self-conscious for the purpose of achieving his or her ends. This is accomplished through a variety of means, including the following: yelling, calling, swearing, making threats, lobbing, insults, humiliation, ostracization, making accusations. Emotional bullies use the above tactics to cause their victims to feel guilt, fear, shame, and embarrassment. The idea is that people who experience these negative feelings will acquiesce. They'll surrender, saying yes to the abusers if only to stop the abuse. Emotional bullies know what they're doing. They realize they're being manipulative. They understand they're being rude and unfair to their victims. That's important to remember. Why? Because it gives you the freedom to stand up to this type of bullying and point out its shortcomings. It also gives you the self-confidence to remain resolute in saying no when the bully is trying to get you to say yes. For example, suppose you've declined a coworker's request for help so you'll have enough time to meet your own work-related obligations. Your coworker responds by shouting and swearing at you. One way to respond is to remind your coworker that shouting and swearing is inappropriate and unprofessional. Moreover, the behavior is unlikely to resolve things in a productive manner. You might even ask the bully to describe the last time shouting and swearing actually worked for him or her. In other words, take the high road. Because you're aware that the abuser is knowingly being manipulative, you'll be less compelled by his or her tactics. You won't feel shamed, fearful, guilty, or embarrassed. Instead, you'll recognize the bully's shouting and swearing as indications of his or her personality flaws. That'll make it much easier to remain assertive and stand your ground. We're averse to conflict. Many folks have difficulty saying no because they struggle with conflict anxiety. They loathe confrontation, and will do just about anything to avoid it. For them, saying yes is a quick and easy way to quash a potential dust-up. I relate to this tendency. I was raised to abhor conflict. When the person I was talking to appeared to become frustrated, angry, or even mildly disappointed, I'd immediately try to assuage them. When such feelings were triggered by something I had said, I'd immediately retract my statements. Here's an example of how such conversations progressed. Requester: Damon, can I ask you a favor? Me: sure. What do you need? Requester: can you take me to the airport this Friday? Me: I'm sorry. I can't do it this Friday. Requester: getting angry, are you serious? You're not going to help me? Me, with a deer-in-the-headlights starer. Requester, getting angrier, don't ever ask me for anything in the future. Me, desperate to end the conflict. Okay. Calm down. I'll take you to the airport. Acquiescing to the requester's demand was easier than standing my ground. This was the case because I had such a strong resistance to conflict. I was willing to give in just to avoid a confrontation. Maybe you can relate. Perhaps you tend to say yes to people so they won't be angry or frustrated with you. You've learned that being nice stifles any chance of a showdown. The problem is, capitulating to avoid conflict reinforces the idea that your feelings are less important than those of the other person. The reality is, they're not less important. You're just being made to feel that way. If you're afraid of conflict, there are small, simple things you can do to overcome that fear. First, recognize that harmony isn't always possible. People have conflicting opinions, needs, and desires. Friction is inevitable. Second, remind yourself that conflict isn't necessarily bad. It's merely the expression of contradictory views. How a person reacts to a conflict, with a calm demeanor or with anger, is an entirely different matter. Third, practice saying no in small steps. Start with situations where confrontations are likely to be non-existent. An example is telling a salesperson at a clothing store that you don't want to buy an article of clothing. Gradually introduce situations where saying no is likely to have a larger reaction. An example is telling a used car salesman that you don't want to purchase a vehicle. By starting with low-risk situations, you'll build a tolerance for conflict. Like a muscle, this tolerance will become stronger with repeated use. You'll eventually grow comfortable saying no, even when faced with someone prone to anger when his or her requests are denied. We develop the people-pleasing habit. Saying yes is an ingrained habit for many of us. It's something we learn to do over a long period of time. The longer we do it, the more entrenched the habit becomes until it's instinctive. We do it on autopilot, agreeing to things before we even realize we're doing so. In a sense, we've wired our brains to respond in that way whenever people ask things of us. Think about the last time you agreed to do something you weren't even remotely interested in. Did you find yourself saying yes before you had even considered how doing so might impact you? That's a learned behavior. It can stem from a number of factors. Or you may have found that saying yes made others happy, and that, in turn, gave you a sense of self-worth. Or you might have discovered that saying yes to your peers made them more inclined to include you. Such lessons have a powerful effect on us. They train us to accommodate others as doing so affords us short-term benefits, approval, sense of self-worth, and social inclusion. The more lessons we observe, the greater our desire to repeat the outcome. We become addicts looking for our next fix. The good news is that, like any habit, the tendency to instinctively say yes can be unlearned. It can be undone. We can rewire our brains so we're more contemplative about the requests being made of us. The key, as always, is to take small steps. For example, in the beginning, just focus on not saying yes immediately. Give yourself a few moments to consider requests and how they'll impact your day. Interrupting your instinctive response will help to short-circuit the habit. Next, examine the reasons you're inclined to say yes. Are those reasons valid? For example, do you desire the requester's approval? Do you need that person to validate your sense of worth? Is it important to you that you're included in his or her circle of friends? You may find that this learned behavior, i.e. automatically saying yes, is prompted by motivations that are trivial to you. It's not easy to reverse a habit you've developed over years of repeated application. But it can be done. The first and arguably most important step is to recognize the habit exists. Chapter complete.